Okay, it's 10 o'clock in the UK. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar today. The webinar we are doing today is titled Introducing the New Edition of Collins International Primary Maths, where we will talk through some of the aspects and changes in the new edition of our maths title. My name is Rob Thompson. I'm the International Sales Director for Collins Learning, and it's my pleasure to host and introduce the webinar this morning. We also have Holly, who you can see in picture. Holly is the editor who worked on this new edition of International Primary Maths. What we're doing today is slightly different from some of the previous webinars we have done. We're first going to introduce a video. Peter unfortunately couldn't be with us live, but he's put together a presentation and a video introducing the new edition and the aspects of it. So we'll listen to Peter for about 20-25 minutes. And after that, we will have a Q&A session at the end, which Holly is going to do for us. I'll be hosting that as well. Any questions that come up during the presentation, or indeed afterwards, if you could put them in the Q&A box, that's the best place to put questions. If they come to you during the presentation, then absolutely we'll address them at the end or after the presentation. So if you use the Q&A box, if you're familiar with Zoom, that's at the bottom of the screen. You should be able to find it quite easily. The chat box really is for greetings and other things that you want to ask us, but the Q&A box for the questions at the end. If you could all stay on mute, that would be great, because it helps with the presentation and avoids sort of unnecessary background noise during the presentation and Q&A. We will ask your questions for you during the Q&A. We are also recording the webinar, so if any of you want a recording of the webinar, there'll be some details sent out about that, and also towards the end we'll provide some contact information, because if you want a certificate of attendance, we can also provide that. I think that's all in terms of housekeeping, so I think we should, without any further wait, go on to the presentation, please.
Hello and welcome. My name is Peter Clark and I'm Series Editor of Collins International Primary Maths. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about the new edition of the scheme and how it supports the revised Cambridge Primary Mathematics Curriculum Framework. I'm also going to briefly highlight how the scheme aims to promote effective teaching and learning in primary mathematics. I want to begin by briefly highlighting some of the more important features of the new Cambridge Curriculum Framework. It is recommended by Cambridge that schools begin teaching the revised framework from September 2021, with the first new Cambridge progression tests available from 2022 and the new Cambridge checkpoint tests taking place in 2023. As with the previous 2011 framework, the curriculum is organised into strands and sub-strands, and in the revised framework, these have been reorganised slightly. In the new framework, there are 3 strands: number, geometry and measure, and statistics and probability. This slide also shows the sub-strands within each strand. Underlying all the strands and sub-strands of the revised framework is the process of thinking and working mathematically. More about this in a moment. On average, across stages 1 to 6, there are 30% fewer learning objectives. But although the number of learning objectives has been reduced, the overall level of expectation in mathematics content at each stage remains pretty much the same as in the 2011 framework. The learning objectives have been substantially rephrased, with more emphasis on mathematical processes than on assessment outcomes. The progression within each stage and between stages has been improved to ensure greater continuity. One of the most substantial changes to the framework is the removal of the problem-solving strand and the introduction of the process of thinking and working mathematically. Thinking and working mathematically is not seen as a separate strand, but rather integrated within all the strands and substrands, as well as the learning objectives, and applies to all 6 stages. The process of thinking and working mathematically encourages learners to talk with others, challenge ideas, and to provide evidence that validates conjectures and solutions. When learners are thinking and working mathematically, they actively seek to make sense of ideas and build connections between different facts, procedures, and concepts. This supports higher order thinking and assists learners in viewing the world in a mathematical way. Thinking and working mathematically comprises 8 characteristics that are presented in 4 pairs: specializing and generalizing, conjecturing and convincing, characterizing and classifying, critiquing and improving. The 4 pairs of characteristics are represented in the thinking and working mathematically star. For more information about thinking and working mathematically and how Collins International Primary Maths supports this new and important feature of the revised Cambridge framework, go to the Thinking and Working Mathematically webinar or session 3 of the training package on the Collins website. Just like thinking and working mathematically, mental calculation is now integrated into the mathematical content of the learning objectives across all strands, not just the number strand. Specific mental strategies learning objectives have been removed in order to make the framework less prescriptive about the specific strategies that should be learned and practiced by learners at each stage. There is more of a recognition that working mentally is at the core of developing learners' mathematical understanding, and the need to give learners greater ownership over the mental strategies they choose to use, and of the need to apply these strategies to all aspects of their mathematics, not just calculations. The idea is to give both teachers and learners greater flexibility and, importantly, encourage learners to view mental strategies as a more personal and less formal choice. So, how does the new edition of Collins International Primary Maths meet the requirements of the revised Cambridge curriculum framework? Firstly, Collins International Primary Maths offers a rigorous and cohesive scope and sequence, or mathematics scheme of work, through the revised framework from stages 1 to 6. At the heart of the scheme is the teaching and learning cycle. Effective planning, teaching, and assessment are the 3 interconnected elements that contribute to promoting learning, raising learners' attainment, and achieving end-of-stage expectations, or mastery. All of the components in Collins International Primary Maths emphasise and provide guidance on the importance of the cyclical nature of teaching in order to ensure that learners reach the end-of-stage expectations of the Cambridge framework. This teaching and learning cycle and the important role that the teacher plays in this cycle are at the heart of Collins International Primary Maths. In addition, Collins International Primary Maths offers extensive teacher support through materials that promote the most effective pedagogical methods in the teaching of mathematics, are sufficiently detailed to aid confidence, while at the same time being rich enough to be varied and developed, take into account issues of pace and classroom management and how these vary between classes, give careful consideration to the key skill of appropriate and effective questioning, provide a balance of teacher intervention and learner participation, a very important feature of interactive whole class teaching, encourage communication of methods between teacher and learner, as well as between learners, and foster mathematical rigour. And finally, and most importantly, are aimed at raising levels of attainment for every learner so that they develop the skills necessary to function as citizens who are autonomous problem solvers. Collins International Primary Maths is based on the constructivist model of teaching and learning developed by Piaget, Vygotsky, and later Bruner, and the importance of starting from what learners know and guiding thinking forwards, of learning the principles of a subject and the connections between ideas within the subject and across other subjects, of focusing on the process of learning rather than on assessing, of the importance of developing learners' thinking by asking questions and encouraging learners to ask questions themselves, of learning through discovery and problem solving, of using active methods that require rediscovering and reconstructing norms and truths, and using collaboration as well as individual activities so that learners learn from each other. And finally, the importance of evaluating the level of each learner's development so that suitable tasks can be set. At the core of the scheme are four of the major principles of Bruner's theory of instruction that characterise the organisation and content of Collins International Primary Maths. In particular, the teaching and learning opportunities in Collins International Primary Maths reflect Bruner's three modes of representations, whereby learners develop an understanding of a concept through the three progressive steps or representations of concrete, pictorial, and abstract, and that reinforcement of an idea or concept is achieved by going back and forth between these three representations. This model illustrates the 6 proficiencies in mathematics that Collins International Primary Maths believe learners need to command in order to become mathematically literate and achieve mastery of the subject at each stage of learning. All of the teaching and learning units throughout the course aim to achieve each of these 6 proficiencies in order to help teachers to establish successful mathematics learning. The scheme supports teachers in planning a successful mathematics program for their unique teaching context and ensures clear understanding of learners' prerequisite skills before undertaking particular tasks and learning new concepts, considered progression from one lesson to another, regular revisiting and extension of previous learning, a judicious balance of objectives and the time dedicated to each one, and the use of a consistent format and structure. The elements of Collins International Primary Maths that form the basis for planning can be summarised according to the 3 levels of planning. The Cambridge Curriculum Framework constitutes the long-term plan for schools to follow at each stage across the school year. By closely reflecting the framework and the Cambridge Primary Mathematics scheme of work, the course embodies this long-term plan. To ensure complete curriculum coverage and adequate revision of the learning objectives for each Cambridge primary stage, the learning objectives from the curriculum framework have been grouped into 27 topic areas or units. Each of the 27 units is designed to be taught over a period of 1 week. This example for Stage 3 shows how the 27 units in Collins International Primary Maths are organised according to the strands and sub-strands of the Cambridge framework. Also, as part of the medium-term plans, Collins International Primary Maths includes a recommended teaching and learning sequence for the 27 units. By using the Collins digital component, Teachers Resource Plus, these plans can be easily adapted to meet the specific needs of individual schools and teachers, as well as learners' needs. This example shows the recommended teaching and learning sequence for Stage 3. The next part of the teaching and learning cycle, and arguably the most important element, is teaching. Collins International Primary Maths believes in the importance of teachers promoting a can-do attitude where all learners can achieve success in and enjoy mathematics, of having high and ambitious expectations for all learners, of adopting a philosophy of equal opportunities with all learners having full access to the same curriculum content, generating high levels of engagement and commitment to learning, offering support and intervention that matches learners' needs, being language aware in order to understand the possible challenges and opportunities that language presents to learning, systematically and effectively checking learners' understanding, anticipating where they may need to intervene, and doing so with notable impact on the quality of learning. And finally, providing high quality marking and constructive feedback to ensure that learners make rapid gains. To help teachers achieve these goals, Collins International Primary Maths provides a highly effective and proven teaching and learning sequence that promotes whole class interactive teaching, providing clear directions, instructions, and explanations. Each lesson is divided into 6 key teaching strategies that take learners on a journey of discovery. This approach is shown on the outer ring of this diagram. The lesson begins with engagement, followed by teacher exposition, guided practice, independent practice, application, and finally review. The inner ring shows the link between these 6 key teaching strategies and the 5 phases of a Collins International Primary Maths lesson plan. The lesson sequence in Collins International Primary Maths focuses on supporting learners' understanding of the learning objectives from the Cambridge Curriculum Framework, as well as building their mathematical proficiency and confidence. The lesson begins with a 5-minute whole class warm-up activity called Revise, where learners consolidate fluency of previously learned facts, concepts and/or methods, and further develop oral skills. It's also an opportunity to revise any prerequisites for learning. This is followed by the main teaching input phase of the lesson, which involves direct whole-class interactive teaching of learning objectives, followed by guided practice from the student's book, which provides example questions that allows learners to work independently on the questions in the workbook. Teach is followed by individual paired and/or group practice, where learners work on questions from the workbook and/or additional practice activities to consolidate their learning. Conceptual and procedural variation builds fluency, deepens understanding, and provides differentiation. Immediately following practice, learners apply. They apply their knowledge, understanding, and skills to reason and solve related problems. The lesson concludes with bringing together the whole class for a 5-minute review, where learners reflect and share their learning, and provides an opportunity for teachers to gauge the level of understanding. Underpinning each phase of the lesson is the development of the thinking and working mathematical characteristics. Each lesson includes highly focused and clearly defined learning objectives. It includes targeted questioning aimed at encouraging and checking learner progress. Guided practice aims at preparing learners to work independently on questions in the workbook and is located in the student's book. Guided practice is immediately followed by independent, intelligent practice. Practice includes written activities at 3 levels of differentiation. Questions type set on a circle indicates that the question is suitable for learners who require additional support with either easier questions or revising prerequisite knowledge. Questions type set on a triangle indicates that the question is suitable for the majority of learners to practice and consolidate the lesson objective. Questions type set on a square indicates that the question is suitable for learners who require enrichment or extension. 2 individual paired or group practical hands-on learning activities are also provided in each unit. These are referred to as additional practice activities. These activities are aimed at developing both independence and collaboration, and to enable learners to develop their own thinking as well as learn from one another. Monitoring, evaluation, and feedback continue the teaching and learning cycle and are used to form the basis for adjustments to the teaching program. Collins International Primary Maths offers meaningful, manageable, and useful assessment on 2 of the following 3 levels. Short-term, ongoing assessments are an informal part of every lesson. A combination of carefully crafted recall, observation, and thought questions is provided in each lesson, and these are linked to specific learning objectives. They are designed to provide immediate feedback to learners and to gauge learners' progress in order to enable teachers to adapt their teaching. Each unit in Collins International Primary Maths begins with a unit introduction. One of the features of the unit introduction is common difficulties and remediation. This feature can be used to help identify why learners do not understand or have difficulty with a topic or concepts, and to use this information to take appropriate action to correct mistakes or misconceptions. Also included as part of the unit introduction is success criteria, which aims to assist teachers and learners in identifying the steps required to achieve the unit's learning objectives. Medium-term formative assessments are used to review and record the progress learners make over time in relation to the learning objectives of the framework. They are used to establish whether learners have met the learning objectives or are on track to do so. Assessment for learning is the term generally used to describe the conceptual approach to both short-term ongoing assessment and medium-term formative assessment. Assessment for learning involves learners and teachers discovering the specific strengths and weaknesses of individual learners and the class as a whole, and using this to inform future teaching and learning. The Collins International Primary Maths Progress Books are specifically designed to assist teachers in monitoring learners' progress, identifying and understanding learners' needs, evaluating evidence, and planning next steps for teaching and learning, all in order to help learners to make progress, raise their level of attainment, and achieve mastery. In order to assist teachers with making both short and medium-term assessments manageable, meaningful, and useful, Collins International Primary Maths includes a class record-keeping document. This document aims to help teachers identify whether learners are on track to meet end-of-stage expectations, identify those learners who are working above and below end-of-stage expectations, make long-term summative assessments, report to parents and guardians, and importantly, inform the next year's teacher which substrands of the Cambridge framework, individual learners, and the class as a whole are exceeding, meeting, or are below in expectations. Long-term summative assessment is the third level of assessment, and it's used at the end of the school year in order to track progress and attainment against school and external targets and report to other establishments and to parents on the actual attainment of learners. By ensuring complete and thorough coverage of the Cambridge framework, Collins International Primary Maths provides an excellent foundation for the Cambridge Primary end-of-stage tests, called Cambridge Primary Progression Tests, as well as the end of primary Cambridge Primary Checkpoint. For further information about the Cambridge Primary Curriculum Mathematics Framework, including Thinking and Working Mathematically, as well as how Collins International Primary Maths supports the Cambridge framework, details on the components of the scheme, and other webinars and PowerPoint presentations to use within your school, go to the training package available on the Collins website. Thank you.
Okay, so there we've had the presentation from Peter with lots of information, and we do have some questions. Firstly, just some information. We're going to leave this slide up on the screen so that you've got the email address there, which is for more information. Generally, if you don't want to ask a question in the Q&A, get in touch with us via that email address, or also for any information about the webinar or about any certificates for attending the webinar or recordings of the webinar. please just drop that email a line and we will get back to you. So we're going to go into a Q&A session. We've got a few questions straight away, and if you're thinking of any questions now, please type them in the Q&A box and we will get to them in order. I think I'm actually going to run down them, Holly, in the order that they came in initially, so that's a good start. The first question we have is, does the CIPM lesson plan phases apply to all of the maths topics?
Yes, so all of the different units across the 3 different strands of maths topics all are structured in exactly the same way. So there's the continuity across the student book, the workbook and the teacher's guide. And so there's a sort of reliable structure for both teachers and learners in how they approach each different topic. And there's all of the different support, like the review section and the review section at the end.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks, Holly. So the next question is one that actually we get asked quite a lot as a team when we're talking to schools. So it's an excellent question, and I get the chance to put it to Holly. The next question is, are there many changes in the new edition of the textbook and workbook compared to the previous edition?
So yes, there are quite a few changes, and the entire course has been fully updated to match the new curriculum. It's been a full update across it. There are some similarities in the topics. Obviously, it's still primary maths, but the way that the new Cambridge curriculum has been structured is a lot of moving objectives around and consolidating them, which means that objectives might be found in a higher or lower stage, depending on what Cambridge have done with it. So while there might be some content that is similar to the first edition, quite a lot of it is new or perhaps moved within the stages. So it's an entirely updated course from Collins.
Excellent. Thanks, Holly. Question 3 then. Will there be answers in the teacher's guide?
Yes, at the back of the teacher's guide, there's a formal answer section for the workbook, and for the student book answers, these are sort of structured within the lesson plans themselves, as it's more of a guided part of the lesson instead of independent classwork. So there are suggestions for teachers within lesson plans about the sort of answers that you might get in the student's book.
Okay, great. Thanks, Holly. So the next question I'm going to attempt to answer first myself, and then Holly, you may want to update if there's anything different. But the next question was, I'm a teacher in Malaysia. When will this new edition be published for us all to purchase? So the answer to that is that digital editions are being published across the stages from this month through to next in an ebook format. In physical format, the books should be starting to be available, I believe, mid-January, Holly?
Hopefully, yes, around January.
So mid-January, which means that if you're in Malaysia or in any other market, we would expect books to be available for you to see from end of January, beginning of February. So that's fairly early in the cycle, which is good. Question, I'm going to answer a question now which is loosely related, which is, in your e-resources, maths book for year 4 is not available. When will it be available? I think we're pretty close to having stage 4 available, are we not, Holly?
Yeah, hopefully within the next week or so.
Yeah, so literally a week or so we should have the maths book for year 4. We've put our digital samples available as soon as we possibly can have them available, so that people have got lots of time to review, and stage 4 is a week or so behind, but it will be in a week's time. Okay, going back to the previous question, what is the difference between Collins International Primary Maths and Collins Busy Ant Maths in terms of syllabus and contents?
So the key difference between these two is Collins International Primary Maths is written to match the Cambridge curriculum and is endorsed by Cambridge International, and it's also written for more of an international audience. And Collins Busy Ant Maths is written to match the UK 2014 maths curriculum. Okay,
excellent. Next question, will there be an English version in kilometres, litres and euros? I guess this is a question as much about measurements and the way that Cambridge addressed the syllabus. So I think what are the measurements is in the new version?
So it's largely metric for measurements. So all of the units on measure use kilometres, litres, centimetres, all of those. And in terms of the money unit, largely we've gone with dollars as a sort of generic currency to use. However, where there are parts of the curriculum that require comparison or things to do with shapes and money, then we have used some other currencies to make it more international. So yeah, hopefully the course in its current format will be suitable for what you're asking for.
Yeah, excellent. So it's kilometres and litres, and then predominantly dollars, as it's a more internationally sort of recognised currency, but some others in there as well. Excellent. Next question. Is it necessary to do the differentiation task in all of the topics?
It's entirely up to teachers. So there's lots of examples given in the book of different differentiation areas and advice for either enhancing or supporting different learners. So it's all depending on what teachers and learners need, really. The workbook itself, which is a key part of the lesson plan, includes lots of different differentiation, which can be done for different learners who have varying abilities in the same class. But there's also the core components that learners are expected to have by the end of the unit that can just be followed by a teacher if they have a more consistent level of ability within their lessons.
Okay, excellent. So next question is I'm going to pose you, Holly, is quite a difficult one to answer in terms of us, because it's not necessarily our control. But the question is, how often will Collins publish a new edition of textbooks and other resources?
Hopefully this will be the curriculum for a long time, and so this edition will be the one that Cambridge will hope for schools to use to teach their curriculum. Obviously, if there are any updates, then the book will hopefully be updated along with that. But yeah, it is difficult to say, as you say, without knowing what Cambridge's plans are.
Absolutely, and just to add to that, from our perspective and our relationship with Cambridge Assessment, we know that they aren't planning any major syllabus changes, and it's Cambridge Assessment syllabus changes that would drive any new edition. We are very, very aware, particularly at primary, of the importance of stability in resources. So we're hoping that we won't have to publish a new edition for some time, to enable it to be properly used. Next question, does the textbook specify the types of manipulatives to be used in the teaching of each objective?
Yes, so each lesson plan and workbook, where it's applicable, has a list of resources, and some of those are digital, some of them are concrete, as in the CPA approach. So there's a full list of resources to help with lesson planning, and hopefully the course has sort of spread that out, so you're not always needing concrete resources. Some of it is available digitally with the digital package.
Okay, excellent. There is a question here on checkpoint and the assessment, which is the new checkpoint regarding for the new curriculum will be for 2022 ? So it's 2022 the launching of the assessment.
As far as I'm aware, the new curriculum is from 2020, but I think obviously with plans for teaching to start from next year, then the checkpoint should be from 2022, I think.
Yeah, and certainly from my perspective in our conversations with Cambridge Assessment, they have been specifying that would be 2022. So that's our knowledge, absolutely. Okay, this will be an interesting one. I'm going to ask the question that what is the difference between Cambridge Primary Maths and Collins International Primary Maths, and how to link these two? Now, I've asked that question, Holly, but I'm also acutely aware that Cambridge Primary Maths is a course that we had quite some time ago. Are you happy answering that one, or would you prefer me to?
Yeah, I'm not massively familiar with Cambridge Primary Maths. If you have
No,
more knowledge on it.
I have the advantage of having worked at Collins for more than 10 years now, so we certainly around with Collins Primary Maths. So it's basically the way to look at it from our perspective is it's a progression. Collins Primary Maths actually was the first the course that Peter Clark wrote for us. It was actually written for the UK curriculum. So Collins Primary Maths was a UK curriculum course for the curriculum prior to the one that's currently being used within the UK. So the natural progression, when the UK changed their national curriculum, when the curriculum of England and Wales changed, then Collins Primary Maths was actually updated into Busy Ant Maths. And you'll see, if you're using Collins Primary Maths, a lot of the structures that you see within that are actually very similar to that within Busy Ant Maths. Where one of the biggest differences between the two was the adaptation in Busy Ant Maths of the spiral approach to learning, and the tighter spirals within that, and Collins Primary Maths was a lot more linear. When we did Busy Ant Maths, we then produced a version of the first Collins International Primary Maths, which was adapted out of Cambridge or Collins Primary Maths, for the international Cambridge curriculum. So the truth is that the relationship between Collins Primary Maths and Collins International Primary Maths is quite tenuous. One was for a UK curriculum prior to the current one, and one is a more international based. It's the same author, and some of the theory and mathematical pedagogy that you see is definitely within the two. If you like the style of Collins Primary Maths, then you'll like the style of International Primary Maths. But the content and the structure and the way of learning in terms of linear versus spiral is quite different. Thought I answered that too long, to be honest with you, but there you go. Next question. Does Collins support provision of concrete manipulatives that are used in the textbook in the teaching of maths? If so, if yes, how can a school access those? Again, I think that's largely about my interpretation of that, and I might be wrong, but my interpretation of that is actually the supply of the physical manipulatives ourselves. There's two things, and Holly, you can jump in on this. One, we try to make sure that the course can be used wherever possible without actual manipulatives. Where there is an absolute need for the manipulatives to be used, they are usually provided as part of a photocopy or something that you can create yourself out of the back of the teacher's guide. But we have tried to minimize the reliance on physical manipulatives. We don't supply those ourselves. There are lots of companies that do that well, but we don't, because we supply textbooks largely. Do you want anything to add on that, Holly, or have I answered that, do you think?
Yeah, so I'd say there are two places where we do sort of offer them. Obviously, we don't offer the physical version, as you said, but with the resource sheets at the back of the teacher's guide, that's where you've got the photocopyable versions of things like spinners, which are used throughout the course. And we've also got the digital tools, which have things like tools for measuring mass and clocks, so that instead of needing those physical materials, you can use the digital tools as part of the extended teacher's guide. And that is perhaps an easier way of doing that as a classroom activity.
Okay, excellent. So next question. For the monitoring, evaluation and record keeping, are these in the student book or in the teacher's guide?
These are largely in the teacher's guides. We've got the record keeping charts at the back of the teacher's guide, which maps objectives against how learners are doing with achieving attainment in those. And then we've also got some support on the digital component, which offers further weekly planning grids and things like that to support teachers in record keeping.
Excellent. Next question. There's still quite a lot of questions coming through, which is good. We've still got a bit of time, so keep firing those questions at us. The next question: is it necessary for schools to use the new edition of this maths textbook and workbook series next year? This is because my school has just informed students to purchase the previous maths textbooks and workbooks. Holly?
Yeah, I'm not particularly certain on a solid answer on that. I guess it depends on sort of schools and when they'll be picking up the curriculum. But I think Cambridge's intention is that teaching will start to take on the new curriculum and start to use the resources that support that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this came up in a conversation that I had myself with Cambridge Assessment last week before last, maybe. So the strict answer is absolutely no. Schools, it's up to your school as to when you will change from one resource to another, and we will ourselves keep the current editions in print for as long as we can, because we know that schools will still need supplies of those. the crux point really comes if your school is taking checkpoint exams. If you are taking checkpoint exams, then whilst you can continue with the current editions of whichever textbook you're using, your content that the students are learning will not match up what they're being assessed for. So there will be an assessment gap. And we have spoken to some schools that want to phase it in. And the most likely phasing is from top down, so stage 6, where the assessment is sort of more complete, is where we would suggest changing first. But in reality, the answer relies on whether your school wants to take the checkpoint assessment or not. If you're not taking checkpoint assessment, then there is no fundamental need for you to absolutely change if you've already committed to purchasing one textbook. If you are, it's a thing we would sort of suggest reviewing. Okay, next question is, how has Collins planned lesson plans which create a bridge between previous syllabus and upcoming syllabus? It's a very good question.
Yep. So within the lesson plans, there isn't a sort of direct link to anything to do with the old syllabus, because we're hopefully catering to new users as well. But one of the things that we've tried to do with the new course is make it as similar as possible to the old syllabus's course, as much as possible. So there's the continuity in terms of the structure of lessons and the format of how they link between the components. So hopefully there's a lot of familiarity for teachers who might be moving over to our new course from the old one. And it should hopefully make the transition a bit more streamlined, because there's so much similarity in the way that we've structured the lesson plans.
Excellent. Okay, still got lots of questions, so we'll continue going through them. This is actually, this question for me brings one of the major changes really to the forefront, and it's an interesting one. So the question is, any activity book for teachers to do class activities with pupils in order to meet thinking and working mathematically?
Yes, so thinking and working mathematically has been incorporated across the entire New Collins course, and that's in all of the different components, both student facing and for the teachers. The Students' book and workbook include activities which, from stages 3 to 6, are all starred and flagged as thinking and working mathematically. So learners start to become aware of the sort of activities that will meet those objectives. And in the teacher's guide, any activities, whether they be independent or as a whole class, are also flagged with TWM. So there's an awareness of where that teaching is being done. And we've also tried to incorporate the language of thinking and working mathematically into it, so that both teachers and learners are aware of when they're doing it, and it's not a sort of passive activity that they might not be aware of. It's really embedded into their understanding of the course.
Excellent. And I think the really crucial thing in that response, from our discussions with Cambridge in terms of the syllabus and our discussion about how to deliver the thinking and working mathematically, is that it's integral. It's very important that it forms a fundamental part and a central part, and is not dealt with separately, because on its own as a separate topic, it has less impact. It should be integral into to everything that's being done. Okay, next question. I think we should be able to answer fairly quickly, and it may be one that I pick up, which is, what level will be applicable for grade 2, level 2 or 3? So this is a question, I think, about the differences in terminology for year groups. Obviously, Cambridge have stages. In the UK, we have year groups, and generally a lot of places will have grades which follow the US system. If you are following US grade notifications, then grade 2 would be stage 3. I think I'm right. Well, I am right on that one. So generally it's stage 3 or year 3 would be grade 2. Okay, we've only got a couple of questions left. I think the first one we've actually answered in a different question, which would be any difference in the textbook. So Holly has talked a bit early on about the differences, or the main fundamental differences between the two books. So I think we've answered that one. and we can answer a question from Cardinal Manjara, is there any sample of the book on the web to help us make further assessments of it? Absolutely, we have full digital samples. If you drop us a line at the Collins International email address, then what we can do is give you access to the, actually we've got digital samples of the pupils book, of some of the workbooks, and of the teacher's guide, so you can have a look at the whole way the course puts together. Okay, we are down to the last 10 minutes, but also we're actually only down to the last one question on the board, so I'm gonna, and I'd actually deliberately kept this one because I thought it's quite a good one to finish off with. So we're going to finish off with this question, which is, kindly tell 3 key features of Collins Mathematics. So putting you on the spot, Holly, what are the 3 main key features that you would say distinguish Collins in its international primary maths?
I think first of all is our treatment of thinking and working mathematically, which is something that we've had really positive feedback from Cambridge on, of how we've incorporated that, and hopefully we've done it in a way that is really useful for both teachers and learners. As this is a new part of the Cambridge curriculum, it might be the thing that you're least familiar with and might have the most questions about teaching, and we've tried to answer those questions and really support teachers throughout the course with thinking and working mathematically. So we've got information in our introduction giving a really comprehensive overview of all of the objectives of TWM, and then, as I said in an earlier answer, it's incorporated throughout lesson plans, student book, workbook, so that you're constantly being made aware of it, making learners aware of it, and incorporating it into your teaching. The second key feature, I'd say, is our differentiation, which the course makes a real effort to include throughout all sections of the course and all sections of the lesson plan. And there's support and advice for teachers right at the beginning of a unit and at the end for both enhancing and supporting learners depending on their different needs. And hopefully this means that schools and classrooms where there might be a really wide range, even in ages and abilities, are able to use the course efficiently and support all of their different learners. And finally, the other key feature I'd highlight is our use of the concrete pictorial abstract, which we've also sort of touched on throughout the webinar, of the way that we've used the different resources to help with teaching, but haven't required that to be used in a concrete form in the classroom. So again, there's loads of variation for different the different needs of schools and classrooms, regardless of what needs to be taught within each unit and each objective.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Holly. I thought that was a great question to end on. So I did. I did see a question pop in and disappear about Key Stage 3. Drop us a line on the Collins International email address. And we do have updated Key Stage 3 materials as well for maths and other subjects, so we can answer that separately. But really, I just want to finish by thanking Holly for her time in answering the questions, and thanking everyone for attending. As I say, if you want to get in touch about any more specific questions, then you've seen the email address, and we always like to hear from you. But thank you very much for attending.